A couple of years ago, I almost didn't publish something I had built. It was a simple PDF. 100 AI prompts for travel professionals. Things like how to write a destination proposal, how to handle a client complaint, and how to put together an itinerary in minutes instead of hours. Not because the idea was wrong, the idea was obvious, and people in my industry were asking the same questions about AI everywhere I looked, but nobody was giving them a straight answer built for their world. The timing was right, the audience was right there. But when it was done, I sat on it. I could not bring myself to put it out. Because of one thought I could not get past. I did not want to be seen as someone pretending to know more than I knew. I am not a developer or an AI researcher. There were people who had been studying this technology for years before most of us had even heard of it. And the thought of putting my name on something in that space and having someone who really understood it look at it and see through me, that stopped me cold. Who am I to teach this? If you have ever asked yourself a version of that question, stay with me. Because that question is not what you think it is. Quick thing before I continue. I send a free weekly newsletter called Rewired Life. If what we talk about here resonates with you, that is probably the best place to stay connected. Link is in the description below. Now back to that question. That fear lands differently when you are over 50. When you are 25, you don't fully know what you don't know. The doubt is quieter. You haven't lived through enough to understand the stakes, so you just go. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And you move on quickly because you have time and you don't have a reputation built over decades that feels like it could be damaged. But after 50, it is different. You have spent years building a career, a name, a way of being taken seriously in rooms that matter to you. You have earned the respect of people around you, and now you're thinking about stepping into something new, something you have not done before, something where you are not yet established. And the fear is not just about failing, it is about being seen trying and not making it. It is about people who have known you for 20 years watching you stumble in public. Or about starting over at an age when part of you thought you would have things more settled by now. That is a real fear. I am not going to tell you it isn't, but I want to show you what it is actually made of. Here is what I have come to understand about that voice. In my experience, the people who feel no doubt when they start something new often don't fully understand what they are getting into. Confidence without awareness is not always a virtue. Sometimes it's just inexperience with good posture. The doubt you feel is not evidence that you're unqualified. The doubt is evidence that you understand the stakes. There is a difference between wisdom and paralysis. Wisdom says, I need to understand what I'm doing before I do it. Paralysis says, I will never understand it well enough, so I will not start. Both feel responsible from the inside, but only one of them moves. When you've crossed the 50 years of age in your life, you have something that is genuinely hard to explain to someone younger. You walk into a room and you can read what is actually happening before anyone has said anything important. You have seen a plan that looked solid fall apart in a way that was obvious in hindsight. And you saw it coming before the outcome arrived. You know what too easy sounds like. You know when someone is confident for the wrong reasons. And you also know what a decision with a hole in it feels like before the hole shows up. That does not come from a course. It comes from years of paying attention to how things actually work. It makes you careful, and being careful in the right amount is a real advantage. But the problem is when careful turns into stuck. One doubt leads to another. One unanswered question opens 3 more. And at some point, you are not protecting yourself anymore. You're just not moving. The doubt rarely arrives as one clean feeling. It shifts depending on the day. The most persistent one is imposter syndrome, the quiet, stubborn sense that you are not as qualified as people assume. That at some point, someone who really knows this field will look at what you have built and see through it. And from what I've seen, that feeling tends to show up most in people who are taking the work seriously. People who have nothing to offer rarely questions themselves with this kind of care. So in a strange way, the doubt itself can be a signal that means you understand enough to know what it is at stake. Sometimes it shows up as comparison. You find someone doing what you want to do, further along, with an audience you don't have yet, and you measure your beginning against their middle. But that comparison tells you nothing useful. Everyone you look up to started without proof. And sometimes it is just perfectionism wearing the mask of preparation. The offer is not ready. The planning needs more time. There will always be a reason to wait if perfectionism is setting the deadline. It is not a standard. It is a delay that knows how to dress itself up. You recognize at least one of these, probably more than one. But naming them is not what moves you past them. What moves you past them is understanding that the standard you think you need to meet is not the standard that actually matters. I sat with the doubt honestly. I asked myself, do I know enough about AI to build something useful for travel professionals? And the honest answer was not everything, but probably enough. Because what I understood deeply was not the technology, it was the audience. I had been a travel professional and writing for travel professionals for years. I knew how they thought about their work, what frustrated them, and what they were hoping AI might actually do for them. I did not need to be the world's leading expert on large language models. I needed to understand ChatGPT well enough to show a travel agent how to use it in their actually daily work. That is a different standard, and it was one I could meet. I still had gaps, so I did two things. First, I asked my son for help with the parts I was missing, and second, I used AI itself to help me organize what I was building. There is a quiet irony in that which I did not miss at the time. Then I shipped it. Not when it was perfect, when it was useful. And it worked. Not because I was the most qualified person on the subject, but because I was the right person for that audience at that moment. I understood their world, so I had enough to make something practical for them. That is what expertise actually means. Not knowing everything, knowing enough to be actually useful to a specific person with a specific problem. Not knowing everything is not the same as not knowing enough. That gap between those two ideas is where a lot of people get stuck, waiting for the gap to close on its own, but it never closes on its own. The place to look is not your resume. It is the pattern of who already comes to you for help. What do people already come to you for? Not the formal version, not the job title. What do people actually call you about? What questions land in your inbox from people who need a straight answer from someone they trust? What problems do people bring to you before they bring them anywhere else? That is not a coincidence. That is a signal. You're already the go-to person for someone. The question is whether you have ever made that formal. Whether you have ever said, I can help you with this. Here is what that looks like, and here is what it costs. And people with real experience rarely get to that sentence, not because the value is not there, but because the doubt gets louder the closer they get to the moment of actually asking. The answer is probably closer than you think. And the place to start looking is not in what you know in theory. It is in who already comes to you in practice. So here's where this gets practical. Spend real time on that question. What do people already come to me for? Write it down and be specific. Not the general category, the actual problem, the type of person, the moment when someone reached out to you instead of someone else, and why. That is where the business starts, not from a blank page. but from something you are already doing in some form for free. The work is to name it clearly and find out whether someone will pay for it. The doubt will still be there when you start, and that is fine. It does not need to go away before you move. It loses its grip when you move, not before. If you are over 50 and you have been sitting on something, an idea, a skill, a body of experience you have never figured out what to do with, I want to say one thing directly. The window is not closed, but it is no longer abstract. At this stage of life, time is not infinite and you know it. That is not a reason to panic, but it's a reason to stop treating this like a decision you can always come back to later. The fear does not go away before you start. It goes away after. The first step is getting an honest look at what you actually have, not the vague sense that your experience might be valuable somewhere. A clear look at what you know, who it could help, and what a first version of something useful might actually look like. If you want help with that, take the Rewired Life Assessment. It will help you get a clearer picture of what you already have, who it could actually help, and what a first step might look like for someone at this point in life. It takes about 5 minutes and it asks the kind of questions most people have never sat down to answer honestly. The link is in the description below.